The tilting of the balance. My wife and I met 32 years ago. We were teenagers. She was a rising senior in high school and I had just graduated. Her father died when she was 12 and I met her when she was 17 and have been with her since. It really was love at first sight. We dated long distance for several years, with our relationship becoming more serious over time. We married in 1992, 6 years after we met. We had our first child in 1996 and our second in 1999. My career was going well and we lived comfortably. I changed things up with my job so I could spend more time with my family, and we lived the prototypical suburban life. 2 kids, 2 jobs, 2 dogs, a mortgage, and so on. About 15 years into the marriage, we were living parallel lives. We attended to the kids' needs, but we spent more time parenting than being good spouses. We were living in the same house, but our lives were disconnected. Over time, our intimacy faded to the point we were not particularly close emotionally, and our physical life suffered. In 2010, 18 years into our marriage, I had a sudden health emergency that left me dead for 5 minutes. It was traumatic emotionally for everyone. Physically, I recovered very quickly and fully, but the brush with my mortality exposed all the weaknesses in our marriage. I wanted to be happy right now, and anyone who wasn't with me on that was not on my team. My wife struggled to fit in because she wanted to nurture me and protect me, and I wanted to live on a high wire. Quite by accident, I reconnected platonically with a woman for whom I had long had a married crush. She confided in me her plan to divorce and I shared with her my marital struggles. We talked too much, about too many things, for about a month before we realized it was not a good idea. We broke contact, but not before my wife suspected an affair. I never had physical contact with my friend, not of any kind, but my wife absolutely believed that this relationship had become a full-blown affair. It wasn't, but she believed it was. By this time, my wife had sought comfort with my best friend. He lived out of town, but they texted often. The 3 of us had been close since college, so 20 years of friendship between us. He was in our wedding. He was my children's godfather and uncle. I trusted him with my wife without reservation. Unfortunately, my trust in him was misplaced. My wife's relationship with him escalated to an emotional, electronic affair shortly after my medical issue and moved quickly. Under cover of a long-planned trip, my wife began a physical affair with him in October 2010. Shortly thereafter, I discovered inappropriate emails that betrayed at least an emotional affair, and my wife's statement that she wanted to divorce me and that she loved him with all her heart. I confronted them both about it. They conceded the inappropriate emotional connection but adamantly denied a physical affair. I resolved that a physical affair was likely, but that even if it had happened, I would forgive them both. After all, I had likewise become emotionally entangled with another woman and I wanted to move forward with my wife to be happy together. I believe that we mutually forgave one another for our contemporaneous wrongs to one another and committed to our marriage. I did. She didn't. She carried on her long-distance affair, emotionally and physically, for the next year until my friend moved to our neighborhood with a job change. They continued their affair for another year after that, into 2013. I was unaware of it. I was well aware my wife and I were on the verge of divorce, but I thought we were just having ongoing disconnection between us. Foolishly, it never occurred to me to think perhaps my wife was sleeping with my friend and that might be part of the problem. It seems to me that it was a limerent affair, in which they operated in an alternate fantasy land where I was the bad guy and they were destined to be together, soulmates denied connection until midlife. Until they got to spend a lot of time together and my wife realized he had so many issues that made him insufferable that she came out of the fog. He demanded they continue the affair, but she broke it off. He moved away and severed all ties with our family. Good riddance, by then, I thought, because he had become a real jerk to everyone. My marriage improved markedly over the next 5 years, all the while I was unaware of my wife's long-term affair. She became the wife every man would want. She took interest in my hobbies, she fed me well, she turned up the bonding to fulfill every want I could imagine. We returned to truly enjoying one another in every sense of the word. And then I had a dream. In the dream, my friend and my wife had resumed the affair I thought they had had many years ago. I woke up and told my wife, in my dream, "You were screwing X again." Now keep in mind, I had only confronted her about it once, in 2010, and she had denied it. This dream is in 2018. For 8 years, after her denial, I never accused her again. When I said, in my dream, "You were screwing X again," the look on her face, and her failure to quickly deny ever sleeping with him, told me everything I needed to know. She had screwed him. We both knew we were going to have a discussion that included her confession. It lingered for a month or so before the time was right for that conversation. Ironically, that conversation occurred at our anniversary dinner to celebrate 26 years of marriage. She confessed that night to the affair and gave up most of the details. However, partly because of the passage of time and partly because she began to trickle-truth me, it was not until 6 months later, and my efforts to reconstruct the timeline independently with occasional questions to her, that she finally put it all out there. In the meantime, the nagging feeling that even in 2018 my wife was lying to me about screwing my friend was deeply troubling to me. I finally told her that if she wanted to stay married, she had to sit down with me and go through it all until I was confident she had admitted everything. We did that in November 2018. It's been agony to know that my wife screwed my best friend for over 2 years, did it under my nose, concealed it for 5 years, and then slow-walked the truth for 6 months. She's remorseful, she's finally admitted everything as best I can tell, and we are going to try to reconcile. Still, I have moments where I want to find X and make him regret what he did or pack my wife's stuff and put her on the street. I love my wife, and I think we are going to live happily ever after, but it won't be without great effort. If I had discovered the affair closer to the end of it, I might very well have moved to divorce quickly. I trust her because, while I didn't know the real motive, she has behaved impeccably since 2012. I'm a resilient guy. For sure there have been bouts of doubt, but in general I'm winning at life. The plan B thing is tough. No getting around the fact that for a while I was certainly not her priority. That's clearly not the case now and hasn't been since 2013. The affair collapsed under its own weight. When he moved to our community, all illusions permitted by distance vanished. She could compare me to him in the same context. He was never going to win that fight. I don't believe she could or would do it again. The situation that permitted this to happen was a perfect storm of history, opportunity, and circumstance. My wife has, in fact, stood by me through subsequent health issues. I'm happy because I have a wife who has made amends and who is highly motivated to be a great wife. We have spent 33 years together, only some of which were marred by her misconduct. We have thoroughly intertwined families. Our shared history outweighs her sin. I am optimistic that we will be happy. I've done the math. My life is better with her than without. Without doubt, the affair began in 2010 and ended in 2013. Without doubt, I learned of it in 2018. I know her guilt drove a lot of her efforts. I have wondered if her guilt were exhausted, will she make the effort just because a good spouse does that? I guess we will see. Yeah, the 5 years of lying by omission has been difficult for me. She denied me the opportunity to decide if I wanted to be in the same marriage that she knew she was in. Again, I weight the past 6 years of her actions far more heavily than her deceit. Sure, she could cheat again, but we aren't now where we were then. We communicate better and our intimacy is much better. I have a better wife now than I did before the affair. I'll take it. She had, however, resigned herself to tell me the truth if I asked. Yes, she did withhold some of that truth for months. That did not help. What she told me immediately was worse than what she continued to lie about. That continued deceit has been a sticking point. I think I learned of the affair in 2010 but was lied to about the fact it was by then physical, too. I was also lied to again by both of them in a deliberate, affirmative denial of the past affair while they were still having the affair. I don't know that I really know the difference between regret and remorse, or what others think that difference is. I know what kind of wife she has been since he removed himself from our lives. Whether she's been motivated by guilt, remorse, regret, love, or a combination of some or all of that I cannot know for sure. I won't ever know everything. I know there was constant electronic contact that pervaded our lives and excluded me for many, many months. I know there was bonding in 2010, 2011, 2012, and maybe 2013. I know that there were at least a dozen physical encounters. I suspect there were more. The temptation to exact revenge on him is strong. Very strong. I have debated contacting his present girlfriend and filling her in on the kind of man she's exposing herself and her children to, what he is capable. If I could put my finger on a consequence for her that is proportionate, fair, and would make me feel better, I'd probably implement it. Nothing seems to be adequate that would allow us to actually reconcile. For now, I choose to forego vengeance. To answer some questions. Why were you silent for so long while you were suspicious? I confronted them, they denied it. I assumed the worst and forgave them. I was not suspicious again. I believed that having been caught, she could not possibly commit that crime again. I was wrong about that. Did you confront your worthless BF? I asked him at the time. I suspected a physical affair. He lied. I did not believe either of them could do what they did next. I was wrong. If he had a spouse or GF during this time, did you expose to them? He did not have a spouse. His girlfriend was my wife. He has a girlfriend now. I have debated telling her. Does anyone else, friends, family, know your wife had a long-term affair and that you have been through all of this? No. Who do you have for support? I'm in therapy. I read a lot. I participate in forums. Do your children know? No, and they will never know. Would you say in general you are a rug-sweeping type of person when difficult situations arise? I clearly did rug sweep in 2010. I do not believe I am rug sweeping now. My former best friend has been completely absent from our life since 2013. We are all better off for that. He was toxic as hell. Yes, I want to go hurt him. But to hurt him, I have to bring him back into my life. And I cannot hurt him without collaterally damaging my wife. He was divorced long before the affair. I used to wonder why he never had a girlfriend towards the end of our friendship. Now I know he did have a girlfriend, my wife. I disagree with you that people are nothing except the worst thing they ever did. People are more complex than that. If I didn't have 30 years to compare to the 3, I might see it differently. She started the affair believing I was in an affair and leaving her. That I kind of understand. But she knew before long that I had never had an affair and she continued hers. That really complicates her contrition. Yes, what she did was extraordinarily cruel, selfish, and destructive. I struggle with it every day. I choose to be hopeful, and her conduct in the present reinforces my hope. I know I am going to struggle with this in varying degrees forever. I've told my wife that if divorcing her meant I would be free from this suffering, I'd divorce her. But divorcing her won't alleviate my suffering. So, I soldier on working to make the best life I can. 1. I am reasonably confident I have all the facts I will ever get. Some are lost to time. The affair was between 2010 to 2013. I think there may be facts that she has not surrendered for fear they would be the last straw. Honestly, at this point, what worse fact could she reveal? The distance between never screwed my best friend and screwed him once is a lot further than slept with him once and slept with him 100 times. 2. My wife wrongly believed I had an ongoing exit affair. My wife was traumatized by my brief death because of her own family of origin trauma, loss of father at a young age. She was lonely in our parallel lives universe. It wasn't a revenge affair, it was an affair she justified on the false belief I had cheated first, and it took on a life of its own after that. Typical addiction affair, I guess. The duration bothers me a lot. 3. Her consequences have been her own guilt in watching me suffer. Many have said and will say that is inadequate. I don't think more suffering on her part is a gain for us. I don't think exposing her to our adult children or my parents or her family increases our affair resistance or advances my healing. I am certainly not going to shame her just for the sake of stitching a scarlet letter on her. I would never cause her to suffer, ever. 4. My wife has been extremely empathetic. She listens, she struggles with me, she is responsive to my requests. She's been truthful, except for withholding a couple of facts in trickle-truth fashion, since the revelation. She has been accountable and scrupulous with her behavior since the affair ended, even if I didn't know fully why. There has been no contact with the AP, of this I am sure. She is sickened by him and by what she did with him. I go to counseling and she sits with me and discusses whatever I want to discuss, even when it is hard for her to see my pain. She feeds me like a king. Superficially and substantively, she has stepped up to work through this with me. It's not easy for her to confront her shame or my pain, but she is getting better at it. 5. All I can say to this is 2 things. If you met me, you'd know that weak I am not, in any sense of the word. I can't say much more without being a braggart, so I'll just ask you to trust me. Not a single person who knows me in real life suspects I suffer like this, or would believe it, and I operate from a position of power as a professional who mingles with money, power, and fame. I know without doubt that were I to choose to divorce her, I would never want for companionship of desirable mates. As to the codependency issue, well, maybe. My wife and I have been together since we were kids. In some sense we grew up together. I love her. I love her more than the pain she inflicted. 6. I am in therapy. I will begin ender soon. I train very hard physically almost every day. I read good books. I have a couple of confidants I reach out to periodically. My wife and I are getting better at having difficult conversations. We don't fight. Our emotional intimacy is better now than ever. I absolutely do not blame myself for her affair. I had a part in making the marriage what it was. I was in the same marriage as she was and I didn't sleep with someone else. That's on her. My WW rewrote the marriage to justify her affair, too. She vilified me to herself and to our marriage counselors. My blood boils sometimes when I think of sitting in marriage counseling with her, raking me over the coals for the exit affair I did not have, was not having, for the effort she said I was not making, and so on, all the while she was fully embroiled in a full-on EAPA. I did not deserve what she did. There are moments when my pride and my ego and my pain tell me to kick her the crap out of my life, tell everyone what she did, and doing that would be chaos for a while. I might get some superficial vindication out of that. It would definitely damage my wife, our sons, our families, and me. I have visualized the outcome of the reflexive divorce her that so many advocate. On the backside of that divorce, I don't have a wife that loves and honors me in the present, that has spent 6 years doing everything a man wants his wife to do. Again, leaving out the part about not disclosing the affair, which I understand, and that really is in love with me today. I would not have the woman who has stood with me for over 3 decades, only a few of which she tainted with her affair. I would not have the only woman I have ever loved. Sometimes I wonder if the most virulently vengeful men watching this, the ones calling me weak and my wife a B, are merely justifying their own decision because they are ego invested in it. Who is weak? The person offering grace to someone who doesn't necessarily deserve it for the sake of everyone he loves, or the man who shouts at strangers on the internet, who choose a different path, calling them weak? My comment: she kept the affair going for 2-3 years happily. She ended it because he became insufferable, not because she could not live with the guilt, not because she realized she loved you, not because she could not continue to lie and deceive you. She ended it because of something he did. She was not remorseful enough to tell you the truth, did not respect you enough to let you make your own informed decision about continuing the marriage. She probably thought that if she confessed at that time, she would lose the comfortable life you provided. Classic cake eater. How does it make you feel to know that you were not her first choice? That the affair ended, not due to you, but because of him. And when it ended, she just returned to her clueless husband and continued the lie. OP responds, cowards shrink in the presence of courage. Oh yes, she is well aware that she distorted reality to do an incredibly selfish thing. She has fully accepted that. We've had a lot of conversations about the difference between what was in her head at the time and how she now sees how messed up her thinking was then. She knows if I had been as weak and as selfish as her, our sons would have divorced parents. She struggles with her shame. She struggles with seeing my pain. We have spent a year breaking bad patterns of communication between us. Circumstances that 9 years ago would have precipitated a cold war between us are resolved in 15 minutes now. We can sit together in intimacy and talk about things we never talked about. Our physical life, which was always good, is now off the charts, and we are well past the hysterical bonding phase. This is the marriage I wanted. I don't think I'd have volunteered to walk this path to get here, but I do like where we are now. There is still much work to be done, but we are willing to do it together. You overstate the bad and understate the good. The affair ended for many reasons. Some of them had to do with seeing him for what he really was, but she also saw me for what I was, too. Her cognitive dissonance collapsed around her. She did grow weary of the deception and the guilt. I was not her first choice during the affair. That sucks. It hurts. That is common to everyone who has been betrayed. It is correct that she did not give me the chance to recommit to the marriage she knew she was recommitting to, and that bothers me a great deal. I thought we had struggled together through a tough time and that we had organically reconnected. She knew if she confessed, then I likely would have divorced her. It was selfish of her to deny me that choice. But we are now where we are now. I am not petty enough to make a decision now just because I would have made it then. I have to make the decision now based on the circumstances as they now exist. I have interrogated her endlessly because, as you say, I had to know what I would be forgiving. What little truth may have escaped detection at this point doesn't change the analysis here, and more importantly doesn't change my feelings about where we are and where we are going. She did not claim that she cheated because of her belief that I was having an affair. In point of fact, her EA had probably begun before she became aware of the facts upon which she rested her accusation that I was having an EA. I think she did turn her EA into a PIA more quickly and more easily because she justified it on the basis of my alleged affair. Her belief that I was having an affair definitely played into the acceleration of her actual affair. No, she does today not believe I cheated. It is strange to me what bothers me. It probably should bother me more than it does that she believed that she was in love with another man for several years. I think that doesn't bother me as much as it might because I believe that love was ersatz, not real. What bothers me most is that she slept him. That happened, for sure, nothing fake about that. I know she traded access to bonding for access to affection and attention. He lavished affection and attention upon her, and she granted him bonding. That bothers me. The only reason I can trust her is because of the way she has lived her life for the past 6 years, again acknowledging that she kept a big secret the whole time. She has been meticulously honest and reliable, so much so there were times that it felt as if she were passive-aggressively suggesting that I was not being honest with her. Does it make sense that she was living so clean that I felt it was an underhanded indictment of my own conduct? In any event, I know for certain she has had no contact with AP, that she has not exposed herself to even the possibility of any other misconduct, that she has been where she says with whom she says doing what she says, and so on. It's boring to a fault, really. If I had discovered the affair during the affair, or shortly after it, I would feel incapable of trusting her. It would have been over. Timing matters. Rehabilitation of one's character, conduct, and trustworthiness are possible. My comment: I get it, affairs burn out and spouses move on and stay married. They got to have a good time and the other person lets us go out of fear of losing them. Happens all the time. Doesn't mean it's okay. It means modern society has a serious self-esteem problem. He's fishing for sympathizers so he can lessen the emasculation. I'm sympathetic to his plight, but the predicament is completely self-inflicted. Story 2. 38 years old and married for 10 years with 2 kids. I love my wife very much and we have a good life. Around 6 months ago I was working away for a week, something that I do a couple of times per year. I am not making excuses, however during this time I was not in a place with depression etc. and feeling low. Whilst working away, I overheard 2 of my younger colleagues talking about online chat rooms, webcams, and how they had used them. They are young, free, single 20-somethings, so no issue. That evening, whilst in my hotel room I decided to take a look. I don't know what made me do this as it's never been my thing before. I had had a couple of drinks and whilst this is not an excuse, I think it may have lowered my inhibitions a little. I have to admit that I found it exciting and naughty. I feel so embarrassed by this now, and I used the webcam chat room for a couple of hours where I liaised with women and men. I didn't show my face or private parts and I didn't type or weigh anything graphic. Apologies if this is weird, but basically, I watched them being naughty whilst I did the same. Again, I did not put this on camera for anyone to see. The camera was aimed at my chest, no face or private bits on show at all, so there are no concerns that anyone has any pics of me etc. Since that day I have been racked with the most incredible guilt over this. I know that my wife would be devastated by my behavior. I feel like I should confess, however I worry that it will spell the end of what has always been a really good marriage. I have never cheated on my wife in real life and I have no desire to use the webcams ever again. I still can't believe that I allowed myself to be so driven by my libido. I am not looking for reassurance or sympathy. What I did was unacceptable. However, do you think I should tell my wife about it, or would you keep it to yourself? I have discussed it with my counselor. I have counseling for my depression issues, and his view was not to tell her as it would be selfish to pass on my guilt to her. He said that his view would be different if I had engaged in a physical real-life affair. I am terrified of the consequences of what I did, not only for my wife and I, but for our children too, despite me being accountable for all of it. I think that I am going to have to discuss it with her. However, I just cannot imagine how I am going to start this conversation. I don't want to minimize what I did as it was wrong. However, I didn't flash my private bits, show my face, or engage in deep, dirty conversation. I just watched. I know this sounds awful. I guess that I could be accused of something. I suppose her issue would be that there was at least some level of one-to-one interaction. Although the other person couldn't see my face, junk, they knew I was there and that I was getting off on it. Sounds so awful as I type this, but I have to be honest if I am posting on here for advice. I don't think the fact that it was women and men would be the issue. She knows that I am 80% straight and that I can feel attracted to both genders. This was vaguely discussed years ago. However, it's never been an issue for us as our marriage, up until this point, has been monogamous. I hate the thought of losing my wife over this crap. Update: I still haven't told her and I have decided that I am not going to. I know that this divides opinion, but the reality is that my disclosure would do nothing other than transfer my angst to her, and I just can't do that. It would change our marriage irreparably, I think, and I also have to think about the impact it would have on family life. I am going to focus on the reasons why I made such a terrible decision and make sure that I am a stronger person in future. I can't change what I did, but I can make sure that I learn from the mistake. I spoke to my dad about it. Might sound weird, but we have a very close relationship and I can talk to him about anything. He agreed that telling her would do more harm than good. He is of a different generation and didn't really see how the chat room stuff was cheating, despite my concerns that it is. So here I am. Just got to get on with life now and try and put this behind me. I know that I will never succumb to this sort of thing again. The stress it has caused has massively outweighed the thrill. My comment: I am glad you have made a decision. On the whole, I think you made the best decision under the circumstances that you are in. You are correct. Guilt transfer from you to your wife would not be conducive to your marriage, or helpful to your wife. Keeping a secret from your wife about something you know would upset her is one step on the edge of a slippery slope.